Story 1. I was cave diving when I found something that shouldn't exist. I don't even know why I'm telling this. No one's going to believe me anyway. Honestly, I can hardly believe it myself, and I was there. I've been cave diving for most of my adult life. It's one of those things that either terrifies you or makes you feel alive in a way nothing else can. Crawling through dark, half-flooded tunnels of stone with barely enough room to breathe, it rewires your brain. You stop thinking in straight lines. The world becomes narrow and endless all at once. Last weekend, I drove 4 hours out to a site I'd been meaning to explore for years. It wasn't on any official maps, just a whisper passed around in old diving forums. A collapsed sinkhole out in the woods, hidden behind a rusted chain-link fence so tangled with vines you'd miss it if you weren't looking. They said the cave beneath it was alive. I figured they were just being dramatic. I geared up alone. No spotter, no lifeline. Reckless, I know. But the site was so remote that bringing another person out there would have raised too many questions. I didn't want anyone else staking a claim. The entrance was a narrow shaft, just wide enough for me to wriggle through with my tank scraping the sides. The temperature dropped the moment I slipped below the surface, the rock slick with something that smelled faintly metallic. It felt like the earth swallowed me whole. For the first hour, everything went as expected, tight squeezes, shallow pools of water forming strange, veined patterns on the floor. My flashlight cut thin white beams into the blackness, carving out tunnels only a few feet at a time. Then I found the passage. It wasn't like the others. The stone around it looked wrong, almost porous, like coral or ancient bone. When I ran my glove over it, the surface felt soft. Almost pliant. I should have turned back right then. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to retreat. But curiosity won. I pushed through. The tunnel narrowed and dipped sharply downward, forcing me into a crawling descent. The walls pressed so tightly against me I could feel my own heartbeat vibrating through the stone. I kept telling myself it was just rock. Just empty space. That was before the breathing started. It wasn't mine. And it wasn't human. It was deep, wet, and rattling, like something with too many lungs, struggling to pull air through 1,000 twisted throats. The sound echoed through the tunnel ahead, growing louder the deeper I went. I should have turned back. I should have scrambled for daylight, no matter how tight the space got. Instead, I crawled toward it. After what felt like hours, the tunnel opened into a wider chamber. My flashlight beam shivered across the walls, and that's when I saw it. The walls weren't rock. They were made of something living. Pale, rippling tissue stretched across the ceiling and floors, pulsing with a slow, sluggish rhythm. Veins as thick as my arms throbbed beneath the surface, branching out like the roots of some impossibly huge tree. And in the center of the room, something moved. At first, I thought it was a pool of water. It shimmered and shifted like liquid. But then it began to rise, pulling itself upward in long, stringy strands, forming a rough, heaving shape. No eyes. No mouth. Just a roiling mass of translucent, worm-like tendrils groping blindly at the air. And the smell, a damp, decaying stench, clung to my skin, soaked into my suit. I was frozen. Completely paralyzed. My body understood something my mind hadn't yet grasped. It wasn't just living tissue. The whole cave was alive. And it was waking up. I tried to back away. Slow. Quiet. No sudden movements. The thing in the center was still assembling itself, its tendrils weaving together in twitching, nauseating patterns. I figured if I was careful enough, if I didn't make a sound, I could slip back through the tunnel before it noticed me. I turned, crouching low, moving one hand at a time toward the way I came. The light from my flashlight jittered across the walls, making the veins in the flesh-pitted stone look like they were writhing. I fought to keep my breathing steady. Fought to ignore the way the walls seemed to tighten with every inch I crawled. Then my foot slipped. Just a little. Just enough for the heel of my boot to scrape against the slick surface, and that tiny sound, that tiny scritch, was enough. The creature stopped moving. It froze mid-assembly, tendrils stiffening like a marionette pulled taut on invisible strings. A low, wet clicking sound echoed through the chamber, vibrating through the stone, and the walls responded. Veins bulged. The living flesh shuddered. The entire cave seemed to lurch forward in one slow, slithering motion, like a body trying to force itself through its own skin. Panic took over. I abandoned any idea of stealth and lunged for the tunnel mouth, my hands clawing at the slick walls, my knees scraping raw against the shifting surface. I half crawled, half swam into the narrow passage, my flashlight bouncing wildly and plunging the tunnel into jerking shadows. Behind me, the breathing grew louder. Faster. Hungrier. Something heavy slithered after me, wet tendrils slapping against the stone with a sickening, rapid rhythm. The tunnel was too tight to turn around. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, the vibrations rattling through my bones. I kept scrambling, dirt and slime-slick stone filling my gloves, my gear catching on the narrowing walls. Every second counted. Then the tunnel shifted. I don't mean it branched off, I mean it moved. The living stone around me flexed, like a throat constricting. The opening I had come through twisted sideways, folding into itself. The way back was gone. I crashed into a dead end, my helmet striking the wall with a sharp, hollow thunk. Pain spiked down my neck. I whipped around, trying to shine my light behind me. And I saw it. The thing had almost filled the passage. It wasn't chasing me with legs or arms, it was dragging itself forward on 100 writhing filaments, each tipped with tiny, grasping claws. And it was smiling. Not with a mouth, there was no face, but the ripples across its form shaped a crude, mocking grin. It didn't just want to harm me. It wanted me alive. The walls pulsed again, tightening, the living stone squeezing inward like a hand about to crush a bug. My flashlight flickered once, then died. And in the pitch black, the breathing closed in. I forced myself to move. One hand at a time, fumbling across the rippling, mucus-slick floor, desperate to find anything I could use. A loose rock. A broken shard of old equipment. Anything. My fingers brushed against something hard. Something, sharp. I didn't even think. I grabbed it, the edge slicing into my glove and nicking the skin underneath. Pain flared in my hand, sharp and grounding, good. It meant I was still alive. Still fighting. I jammed the shard into the wall. The living stone reacted. It wasn't a sound, more like a vibration, a high-frequency pulse that rattled my teeth and made my nose bleed instantly. The wall writhed under the impact, veins spasming and pulling away from the wound like worms recoiling from salt. I stabbed again. And again. Each strike tore more of the pulsing tissue apart, revealing layers underneath, slick, twitching muscle, then wet, pale structures, then something that looked like a vast network of tangled nerves. The whole tunnel shook. From behind me, I heard the thing unleash a shriek, a gurgling, chittering noise like thousands of tiny mouths tearing open at once. It was coming faster now. No more slow, deliberate dragging. It knew what I was doing. It knew I was hurting it. I dug the shard in deeper, carving a rough hole through the wall. My hands were slick, whether it was my own blood or something else from the cave, I couldn't tell. The air tasted metallic and foul, thick with rot and something sharp, like burnt hair. The hole widened just enough to reveal a faint glimmer of light beyond, cold, bluish light. Not daylight. Something else. But it was an exit. Or at least, a way out of this nightmare. I shoved my body into the gap, feeling the living membrane tear around me, sticky strands clinging to my suit. The cave tried to pull me back, veins snaking around my legs, tendrils lashing at my arms, but I fought harder, kicking, tearing, screaming into the pitch-black air. For one terrible moment, I felt hands, not tendrils, hands, grabbing at my ankles. Thin, brittle fingers with too many joints, clawing, pleading. I didn't look back. I tore myself free, half falling, half crawling through the ragged hole, into the unknown light beyond. I hit the ground hard on the other side, sliding across slick stone. My flashlight, still strapped to my wrist by some miracle, sputtered back to life with a weak, shivering beam. And I saw where I was. Not another chamber. Not freedom. A nest. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of those same fleshy tendril creatures, all slumped in tangled heaps along the walls, sleeping. Shuddering softly in rhythm with the breathing pulse of the cave. They hadn't seen me. Not yet. But one of them, the closest one, twitched. And slowly, began to stir. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. The creature closest to me slumped back down, its twitching subsiding into slow, wet convulsions. Around it, the others continued their rhythmic pulsing, a grotesque mimicry of sleep. I had to move. As I edged along the wall, my flashlight's weak beam swept across the stone, and I saw it. Markings. Deep grooves, almost invisible against the pulsing living stone, spiraled across the surface like scars. Arrows. Symbols. A path, carved by someone before me. I followed the markings with my eyes, tracing them to a darker corner of the cavern. And then I saw it. The massive thing at the center of the nest. It wasn't like the others. It was huge. Rooted into the floor by thick cords of veined flesh. Its skin stretched taut over a skeleton too angular, too wrong. Its head was a mass of writhing tendrils, shaping crude impressions of faces, grinning, weeping, silently screaming. It wasn't breathing. It was dreaming. And the whole nest pulsed in rhythm with its dreams. If it woke, all of them would. I edged toward the carvings, every step a battle against my own trembling body. Halfway across, the tendrils along the ceiling shivered. The massive creature twitched. The nest stirred. I stumbled the last few feet to the far wall, found a fissure hidden behind the markings, and squeezed through just as the nest exploded into motion. Tendrils lashed. Bodies stirred. The massive thing in the center began to unfold. I forced myself upward through the narrow stone shaft, kicking at grasping fingers, clawing at slick stone, until I burst into the open. Collapsed onto cold, wet grass. The sinkhole behind me was silent. The sky above was purple with dawn. The breathing was gone. For now. I don't know how long I lay there. Eventually, I staggered back to my truck and drove. I didn't look back. I haven't gone near that place since. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and I can't sleep, I swear I can still feel the breathing. Soft at first. Like the distant pulse of a hidden tide. Getting closer. I moved last month. Packed up everything. Left the state. It didn't help. 2 nights ago, I found something on my living room floor. A wet, pale thread, about the length of my finger. Still twitching. And last night, when I pressed my ear to the wall, I didn't hear the sounds of the city. I heard the stone breathing. And this time, it wasn't just calling my name. It was whispering how to find me. Story 2. Every night for the past week, I've woken up at exactly 3:42 a.m. Not approximately. Not around that time. Precisely 3:42, according to my phone, my digital alarm clock, and the watch I've started keeping beside my bed just to double-check I'm not imagining it. It started last Tuesday. I'd gone to bed at my usual time, around 11:30 p.m., after scrolling through social media too long as always. There was nothing unusual about the day, work had been busy but manageable, dinner was leftover pasta, and I called my mom like I do every week. Just an average, quiet evening. But then I jolted awake, with that unmistakable feeling that something was off. You know that sensation, when your body reacts before your brain fully registers it. My heart was already pounding when I opened my eyes in the pitch-black room. 3:42 a.m. I lay perfectly still, listening. My one-bedroom apartment was completely quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car rolling past outside. After a few minutes of hearing nothing out of the ordinary, I told myself it was just one of those random wake-ups people sometimes get. Probably stress from work deadlines. I rolled over and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next night, I was more careful. I avoided caffeine after 4 p.m. Skipped the usual doom-scrolling session and read a book instead, supposedly better for winding down. I was asleep before 11. And still woke up at 3:42 a.m. This time, the feeling was stronger. Not just unease, there was a creeping sense of presence. Like I wasn't alone. My heart thudded in my chest as I stared into the darkness, straining to see past the slightly ajar bedroom door. I never close it fully because it makes the room feel stuffy. But nothing moved. The darkness was still. The only sound was my own breathing, which I tried to keep slow and steady. After what felt like hours, though it was probably just minutes, I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. I swept it across my bedroom, then out into the living room. Empty. Totally empty. But the next night, that was when I got truly scared. I'd taken melatonin and fallen into what felt like a deep sleep. Yet I woke up suddenly, eyes wide open at, you guessed it, 3:42 a.m. This time, I was covered in sweat. My shirt clung to me. But the strangest part? I was already sitting upright in bed. I had no memory of moving. And this wasn't some foggy, dreamlike moment, I was fully alert. My skin tingled with that cold static feeling of being watched, even though I saw nothing. That's when I noticed it. A smell. Faint, but there. Something burnt, but not food. Not a wire or outlet either. It was something organic, like singed hair. Or something even harder to place. Subtle enough to doubt, but strong enough to stay with me. I got out of bed and checked every outlet. I unplugged anything unnecessary. Felt the walls. Nothing. And the smell had vanished, if it had even been real in the first place. The next day, I texted my friend Mia. I tried to keep it casual. Hey, random question, ever go through a stretch where you wake up at the same time every night? She replied quick. Like when my son was a newborn and I had to feed him at 2 a.m. Face with tears of joy. I clarified. No, more like, with no reason. I keep waking up at 3:42 on the dot and it's freaking me out. Probably stress, she answered. Or maybe your neighbor upstairs has a weird routine. Our brains notice patterns even when we don't. That actually made some sense. The guy upstairs works weird hours sometimes. Maybe it was the sound of him getting home or taking a shower that was triggering it. I felt a little better, until night 4. Because that's when I woke at 3:42 a.m., and this time, I clearly heard footsteps in my living room. Light, careful steps. The kind someone makes when they're trying not to be heard. I lay frozen in bed, barely breathing, my phone clutched in my hand with emergency services pre-dialed. The footsteps stopped. Then came a soft scraping sound, like furniture being gently moved. I've never considered myself especially brave, but something about the precise, deliberate way those sounds unfolded stirred more frustration than fear. This was my apartment, my space, and whatever was happening was invading that. I turned on my bedside lamp, grabbed the baseball bat I'd placed nearby the day before, just in case, and stepped toward the bedroom doorway. The living room was empty. The front door still had the chain on from the inside. All windows were locked. Nothing looked out of place. I checked every inch of the apartment, closets, behind the shower curtain, under the bed. I even peeked inside the fridge and kitchen cabinets, even though I knew logically that was overkill. Still, nothing. That's when I noticed something subtle but unmistakable, the couch had shifted. Just 2 inches from where it normally sat, but it was enough to make my stomach twist. I didn't go back to sleep that night. In the morning, I convinced myself I must have bumped it while cleaning. Maybe I hadn't noticed. Maybe the footsteps had come from the upstairs neighbor. Maybe I'd dreamed the whole thing and it had just felt real. But I was starting to question myself, and that was the most unsettling part. So I decided to take a more rational approach. That evening, I photographed every room in my apartment, carefully documenting the furniture positions. I set up my laptop to record the living room overnight, and I took a sleeping pill to try and get some uninterrupted rest, hoping that maybe I'd sleep straight through 3:42 a.m. It didn't work. My eyes opened at 3:42 exactly, and it felt like something had peeled them open. The sleeping pill had left me groggy, my body heavy, my muscles slow, but my mind was clear. Too clear. The apartment was absolutely silent. But not just quiet, absent. No refrigerator hum, no pipes, no distant traffic. Nothing. It was like the whole place had been wrapped in soundproofing. The silence was so complete, it felt like it had weight. Then, my bedroom door slowly swung shut. I hadn't touched it. There wasn't a breeze. It moved deliberately, like someone had gently pushed it, until it closed with a soft click. I couldn't move. The sleeping pill was holding me down like a weighted blanket, while my mind shouted for me to get up. I watched the doorknob begin to turn, so slow I could hear each faint mechanical click from across the room. With everything I had, I forced my body to move. I grabbed my phone and flicked on the flashlight, just as the door began to open again. The beam cut into the darkness. No one was there. The door creaked fully open, touching the wall behind it and revealing an empty living room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat in bed with every light on, the baseball bat across my lap, wide awake and waiting. In the morning, I opened the laptop recording with trembling hands. At exactly 3:42 a.m., the video cut to static. It stayed that way for 1 full minute, then resumed, showing a still, quiet living room. That day, I called out of work. I needed answers. I spent hours researching carbon monoxide poisoning, sleep disorders, neurological conditions. Anything that could explain this. I even called my landlord to ask if any past tenants had ever reported anything strange. He laughed. Like what, ghosts? This building's 15 years old, not exactly haunted mansion material. I bought a carbon monoxide detector. Normal. I checked the locks again. Everything was still secure. I even asked my neighbor if they'd heard anything unusual. Nothing. That night, I decided to do something different. I packed a bag and went to stay at my friend Mia's place. I didn't tell her the whole story, just said my heating was acting up and I needed a night away. She let me crash on the couch, while her husband and young son slept down the hall. Just being around other people made me feel safer. Like this thing, whatever it was, might leave me alone for just one night. I woke up at 3:42 a.m. The living room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of the cable box. Unlike at my apartment, I didn't feel immediate fear, just confusion, and growing frustration at whatever was causing this. Was it my sleep cycle? Stress? Something else? Then I heard a small voice. Who are you talking to? Mia's son stood in the hallway entrance, holding a stuffed dinosaur in his arms, his eyes reflecting the dim light. I'm not talking to anyone, buddy, I whispered gently. Just woke up for a minute. You should go back to bed. He tilted his head, but his eyes weren't looking at me. He was staring into the space beside the couch. But you were talking to the tall man, he said. A chill ran straight through me. What tall man? I asked, my voice barely a breath. He pointed to the empty corner of the room. The one who followed you here. He's bending down to whisper in your ear. That's when I felt it, the slightest breath, right next to my head. And with it, that same strange smell I'd noticed before. Burnt, something. Like hair, or something not meant to burn. I'm writing this now from my car, parked outside a 24-hour diner. I've been here since just after 4 a.m. Mia thinks I left early to visit my parents. I told her I had errands to run, a drive to make. She doesn't know the truth, that I have no intention of going to my parents' house and bringing whatever this is with me. It's 3:41 p.m. as I write this. In 12 hours, it will be 3:41 a.m. And then 3:42. I don't know what's happening. I don't know if I'm dealing with stress, a sleep condition, or something outside my understanding. But I do know this: Mia's son saw something. Something I didn't. And kids don't usually invent specific things like a tall figure bending down to whisper in someone's ear. I haven't gotten more than 2 hours of sleep at a time in over a week. And now, I'm writing this not just to process it all, but because someone out there needs to know what's happening. Just in case tonight is different. In case, tonight at 3:42 a.m., I finally learn what this presence wants. Because maybe the most terrifying part of this entire ordeal isn't that I might be imagining it all. It's that I'm not. And something real has taken notice of me. Something that's completely patient. Something that only needs 1 minute each night. Until it's ready for more. 1 like. 1 subscription. That's all it takes to keep the nightmares coming.